I was an intern at a quick anecdote. I was an intern at a studio, one of my first jobs, recording and setting up recording sessions and things like that. There's like, they told me they would record these, they would use the space to record these sessions for promo and PR. And the head of the studio, one of the engineers, was like, okay, so Bruno Mars is coming in today? And I'm like, okay, I don't know who that is. I had to look him up. There was a time when you had to look.
Was that like 06? No.
It was 09. It was 2010.
Yeah.
It was 2010. And I'm like, Bruno Mars. And I look it up. Who's that guy? And I'm like, oh, beautiful girls all over the world. He was just a featured guy on certain songs. I want to be a billionaire.
Right. He sang
so
the chorus.
Freaking bad. Yeah. He was doing hooks. And he wrote the songs, but I didn't know who he was. I'm like, oh, Bruno Mars. Okay.
He wrote those songs?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Cool.
Yeah. And he's written One Day, Montes Yahoo.
No way.
Yeah, Bruno Mars.
Montes Yahoo didn't write that?
No.
Oh, that's so disappointing.
Maybe some of it, but Bruno Mars is at least a co-writer or writer. Bruno Mars has written so many hits.
Can I ask you? I know this is the exact type of question you hate. How much do you think someone makes off writing one day? Is it like $10 million? Is it $1 million?
It's not $10 million, I don't think.
I'm saying lifetime, like the value of that.
You don't
song
just
to
call
the
it
writer.
quits after writing one
No,
day.
I'm not saying that, but like, just for an idea of how much Bruno Mars makes, like off of a hit song, like one day, what does that bring a writer?
Oh, it's an interesting question in today's songwriting market because, oftentimes the way it's structured is like writers who have publishing deals will get a big advance up front. Here's a lot of money so that you can now be free to and to go and write songs with different people. You don't get to that after a little bit, but publishing advances can be quite significant after you've written a hit song. So it's like proof of concept. This guy's a great writer. So you get money in that way, and then you get a lot of back end money from the use of songs. And I don't know, the use of songs in any kind of royalties that generate on the back end. Any licenses of that song one day used for the Olympics. The labels who own the master recording of that song and the publishers are negotiating to. Our friend would be very happy with where this podcast is going, by the way. So publishers, labels, the label owns the recording of the song. The publisher owns the actual song, and Bruno Mars is partially a publisher. That's a whole separate conversation. Okay. But there's two copyrights for a song. There's the recording, and then there's the song.
So when
the song is the lyrics and the like someone, if I did a cover song of One Day and recorded it, the label wouldn't own that, but Bruno Mars and the publisher would.
They own the song of it.
The song, the intellectual property. That is the song. When someone buys
their masters, they're buying the original recording.
Just the recording. So if somebody sells their masters, labels are generally in the business of owning master recordings of songs, and publishers own the actual song.
So then when the Olympics goes on and One Day plays, the recording and the song itself both have to get paid.
Sure. It's called the sides. They say paying the master side and the publishing side.
Cool.
Now you'll get, if they negotiate, $200,000 to use the song, Bruno Mars will get paid on that licensing fee, and his publisher will get paid. They split it, the writer share and the publisher share. And the label will negotiate a master sync fee to use that song. So that's one stream. But then it gets played on the radio, and you're making public performance royalties. A radio play is considered a public performance. Performance is
a radio station pays every time they play a song?
Yeah. You get public performance royalties on that, I believe. It can be complicated because if you're unknown, sometimes you're paying for radio campaigns to play your songs. But at the end of the day, you're getting back end on, but with streaming and everything, you're getting a little bit of that, not a ton. But in today's and it used to be the biggest thing was mechanical royalties, which were the sale of the record. You wrote a hit song back in the day and it sold a ton of records. You're getting paid every time the record gets sold. 9.1 cents every time a record gets sold was generally 9.1 cents per record. It was a shitty rate, but that's what you would get on a mechanical royalty of a record. But we're not selling records anymore.
Right.
So for strictly the songwriter, they're in a bit of a amorphous place with how they should be compensated because you're getting a bunch of that. You're getting a bunch of revenue from back-end royalties and streams and licenses and stuff like that. But people aren't selling records in the same way. So it's hard to quantify from one hit song how much. It's a hard question to answer.
I guess can you give me? Is it closer to 50 million or 1 million?
If I'm ballparking,
Yeah.
1.
Okay. right, there you have it.
Not 50. That's just an educated guess.
Right.
$50 million from one
I don't know how much
song.
is like celebrate good times. Come on. That's,
over
that's
the
not
course of
worth
a
it,
career, I hear you, but what he's really getting is, holy shit, who wrote that song? What a hit song. All right, I'm going to put him in the room with every single...
I'm not interested in that. I want to know at what point...
You can call it. I get it. It's not a lottery, Michael. It just
I'm joking,
isn't a
I'm
lottery.
joking.
But a hit
But I'm
song
curious
can do a
about that.
ton
I'm
for
curious
you.
about that.
It can give you a hit song is like anything. Somebody says, wow, a publisher's come up to you and say, hey, I'm going to offer you an advance. I'm going to renegotiate your publishing advance. I want to give you, a couple $1 million or a couple $100,000 to sign with me exclusively as one of my artists, and I'll put you in the room with all these different people, and we can generate hit songs. Because hit songs drive traffic to concerts. Hit songs do everything. It's all pop songwriting is all the hit songs that fill the arenas. It's all one day. Everybody singing like that's the value. So it's a question of where it lands.
I'm curious about it in the sense of like Bruno Mars.
But
walks
one hit
into
wonders. They didn't just retire on that.
But Bruno Mars walks into a room, and I think of him as like a great, maybe even like iconic artist. I don't necessarily think of him as like a very, very, very wealthy man. Like in the same way, like does when he walks into the room, does he have $100 million? Or I'm just curious, like how rich is Bruno Mars? I guess we think of like Jay-Z as like what do you call that? Like a maven, not a maven,
A mogul.
But like it's interesting to think of these artists as also very powerful, wealthy people. I don't know why that's interesting to me.
I think I can explain it to you.
Yeah,
because
in the same way a finance person.
Yes,
is,
I think in finance, you perceive them and money as one and the same. They're in the business of money. All they do is everything they do is transactional.
Yeah.
In a sense. And artists and actors, they're all wealthy too, but you don't ascribe power to them for whatever reason.
George Clooney, I think, is a billionaire.
Right. And I'm sure they have tons of business going on too, and they're all wealthy, but it's very easy for you to know why. When you see an artist, you're like, yeah, Bruno Mars is wealthy. I don't even think about it because it's so obvious to me why he's wealthy. You can attach his wealth as earned and accepted because what he's giving is so out in front. Finance people, investors, businesses, entrepreneurs, they're creating things and providing value in ways that are much more complex to understand conceptually than an actor's amazing performance. Bravo, he deserves all the money in the world. The value given and the value received is very obvious and easy to comprehend. From a third-party observer. You're observing Bruno Mars write a hit song, you like the song, and then his arena gets filled with people.
I don't think that's it. I don't think that's it for me.
So why don't you describe why isn't Bruno Mars powerful even though he might have as much money as a finance guy?
I listen to
because I don't agree with your assessment that money equals power in the way that you do.
I listened to an interview with Rob Dyrdek, who's the guy who had Fantasy Factory on MTV, and he has it's like this Tosh.0 type of show on MTV. He was explaining that 60% of MTV's airtime is filled with Rob Dyrdek content, which is first of all wild. Okay. But he was talking about it from the perspective of he was like he came up as a skateboarder, and he was very, very rich in his like 20s and 30s because he was just crazy and like had all these shows and deals and whatever. But he said like I think around the time he turned 40. He realized he was sort of like young rich almost. Like he had a few $1 million, but like he sort of started looking around and realized like there's like me rich and then there's like generational wealth, 50, 100, $500 million people. And like he just spoke very interestingly for like an hour about like wanting very badly to get into these rooms and into sort of this club of people with that much wealth. It was just an interesting podcast to listen to, but so it's interesting for me to think about people that are on that level. And it's just, I don't know. I'm just thinking about that lately.
We talk about this in the band all the time.
Yeah.
We apply sort of the success that we've had and the endeavors we've had at the level that we've had it. And there was a time when I said, man, if only I had a song on TV, I'd be set.
Mm-hmm.
Man, like, oh, these guys, they have these songs in the commercials and the movies. Like, you see those songs, you romanticize it and pedestal it as some lofty goal.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't take anything away from the fact that I've achieved that. And I've had stuff in that vein, and I know how it's perceived because I once perceived it that way, right? Like, you sort of put everything into this category of the dream.
Mm-hmm.
But then once you get there, you just realize that you're at the, the top of the hill, the bottom of a mountain. And if you apply that same thing up the scale, I guarantee you,
Yeah.
Bruno Mars doesn't go, I fucking made it. I don't think he does. I know it's hard to imagine.
No, I'm not even.
Even though he's playing the
way.
Super Bowl.
I'm not really thinking about it that way, though.
No, but the way you just described this whole perception of, I want to get in the room with that level. And I'm sure there are moments like that where you're with people, but we're perceiving the world. You're presenting a world in which there are these like castes and hierarchies to get through. And then once you're there, it's a whole different thing. And my experience has been, it's actually once you get there, you're like, oh, I'm coming behind the curtains and the flash and the Rolexes. And I realize it's a lot of just really hardworking people keeping their head down and doing everything they can. And a lot of talent and skill, but a lot of admirable hard work and crazy amounts of work ethic and applying yourself in that way. It's much more of that and much more of, it's much less of a arrived at paradise dynamic and setup than as opposed to, it's just a constant hike up the hill, hike up the mountain.
It's interesting, I guess, because is
that not what you were saying?
No, I don't think that's what I appreciate that part of it. I think maybe what I'm trying to say is having a few $1 million is like awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Having $100 million is a responsibility. And like it's curious to me to think about Bruno Mars managing that much wealth. It's interesting to me to think about. I don't know that part of his life. Like, how does Bruno Mars manage that much wealth?
But we're in this space now of like follow your dreams porn online of all these media types and wealth is become pop culture. Like the glamorization and the like proliferation of wealth content and motivation, making it in the millionaires club and the billionaires club. You want to get to that. There's a lot of that packaged stuff out there. But if you really look closely at the Elon Musks of the world and these people who have crazy amounts of wealth and success, don't you ever get a sense from them that they're talking to people who are perceiving them one way and they're looking at them back and saying, you don't really get it? Like, yeah, you think he said, like, Elon Musk once broke down. He's like, all this anti-billionaire BS. And he said, yeah, sure. So I own a percentage of Amazon, a percentage of Tesla, and that's kind of how it works. But I don't just have what you think I have. I don't have this life that, even though it looks that way,
Yeah.
I think what Elon has is a ridiculous amount of stress. That's what he really has.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm talking about.
Managing an insane amount of business and companies, and like we think it's
Bruno
like this.
Mars has that too,
of course.
And I just think of him as like sitting at a piano, being like, but like he has this like enormous, massive like life,
right? To manage.
To manage, and like I wonder, what does he invest in? Does he have like real estate? Does he have?
That's interesting.
Like a fund or something?
You're purely curious. I'm
just purely curious. Yeah, I'm not really like porning him of like he can do whatever he wants. I'm just like, but like not just him. A lot of these artists that we think of as sort of just like, oh, you're cool. You come on the radio and play a show. Like they have these massive spheres of influence in life, and probably tons of people trying to like,
What I have heard does happen with accumulated wealth and prominence and success. That is true to some extent, is it becomes harder and harder to get to that person. In other words, there are more barriers to them.
Right.
Which becomes like a filtration system because Tim Dillon said to Joe Rogan, you have a lot of people now who want things from you. You have this platform. People want things from you. He goes, yeah, I have 4 phones now.
Exactly. And he's like, you're in my A phone.
Yeah, exactly. But he said you that's one thing that I've heard, just not personally, obviously, but people said you have to put these barriers in front of you a little bit. So sure, Bruno Mars, I'm sure, has assistants, managers, accountants, business managers, everybody specialized to do things because you can't manage that kind of thing on your own. But there is a part of him, I can tell you, that is also sitting at the piano going dee 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 dee.
So you were an intern in the studio, and what did you say?
And so I mean, it starts from there. That and I would say is the Iron Man engine, the thing in his chest. For someone like Bruno Mars, that's driving the business, like that ability, that skill. That's at the core of it. And I always find it funny when I don't kid myself sometimes with certain relationships that I have where everyone's all friendly and nice. And I'm like, and I don't, and it's not disingenuous, but I'm also like, we're friendly and nice for a very particular reason. Like you like a certain thing I've done. You know what I mean? Like we met in that context and we're like collegial and friends now. And there's relationships I have like that But I know that, and it doesn't take away from it, but just as a matter of fact, it's not based on like childhood memories or bonding. It's based on the fact that you loved this song that I did, and it proved that I was competent in whatever you, or that our band did. Like, that's why you're like, you know, that's how it came about.
So what does that have to do with the Iron Man heart?
That a lot of, my point is that a lot of the success is driven from a place of what he's able to do,
not
talent
from the
wise.
admiration.
No, it's just driven from his abilities and talents.
Oh, I got you.
And then he applies that and puts it out there. The people around him and the empire he's built, I mean, he has his parents and his close friends and his close circles. And then there's everybody else. Like, what is it about Bruno Mars that's still driving it? It's that Iron Man thing I'm talking about is the fact that he can write a fucking hit.
So that's wild.
He can get in there and write a melody and you go, oh, that's awesome.
So compared to someone who's just been skimming off a penny from trillions of transactions with like corporate bonds, it's like,
well, maybe that person has an ability too to generate, like,
yeah, that's a good point.
They have an ability. You're taking it away from them because it doesn't emotionally move you.
That's a good
But
point.
that person has an ability too. Otherwise, why doesn't everybody just do that?
That's a good
Go
point.
make $1 billion doing a random actuarial transactional bullshit. It doesn't do anything for me emotionally, and I think the reason they get so demonized is because their motives are very clear. They're not trying to make something other than money. But it takes a lot of skill and ability and ethics to do it, work ethic to do it. So I'm just saying what's driving all of that is Bruno Mars' ability to sit at the piano and write a killer hook. And I don't, that doesn't, if anything, that's just to be clear.
Yeah.
You know, my point is, I was in the studio with him. I didn't understand. I didn't know who he was. He comes in with like a posse, like a group of people. His like one guy is his co-writer from this. I found out later, one of his like fellow co-writers who's written a lot of songs with him. One of his guys in the Smeezingtons was a Tenafly guy.
Smeezingtons?
Yeah, his writing group is called the Smeezingtons. They wrote like his first album, and like his producer, one of his producers that he works with, was a guy in a band I used to play like in high school with. We used to do shows together, and he was a Tenafly guy, and he would talk about it back in the day. Yeah, I'm working with this guy, Bruno Mars, is working on some tunes. It's just like any other artist, aspiring pop artist. The point is, he gets in there, I plug it all in, ready, set up to go, just an acoustic guitar, and I was just ready, hips record. I'll catch a grenade for you. I never even heard these songs. No one had. This was before the run. You know, he starts playing. Easy come, easy go. That's just how you live. And we're all like, everyone's heads just turn, pin drop. Undeniable. I was just like, and then I'll catch a grenade for you. That whole, everybody, his whole, it was mind blowing.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like,
that's cool.
And I was like, I still have the recording somewhere. I have it on a drive. I have it on a hard drive somewhere. I have it somewhere.
That's really cool.
But I was like, it's on an old hard drive that I have to like.
Do you technically, should you be getting paid for every time that's played?
No, I was just the recording assistant.
Oh.
But I looked over. He's playing his hits that were, and I'm watching him play these songs. Today I don't feel like doing anything, and I'm just like, damn, this guy is something else. And then a week later, he explodes.
Oh, yeah.
A week later, I'm like, Bruno Mars, SNL. It's just, you know, like when you learn a new word, you start to see it everywhere.
Yeah.
I learned of a new artist.
Yeah.
He wasn't huge yet, but he was about to be. And I'm sure a lot of people knew that in his circles and labels and whatever. But he wasn't a household name yet. I went home. I was like, oh, yeah, I saw Bruno Mars. Who's that? I don't know. Some guy. I think he sings that song. Oh, I know that song. He's everywhere. The next week. And I was like, oh, that was cool.
So what did you walk away from that experience with?
That I suck. No, well, he was like, Bruno, nice to meet you. And he was like up to my shoulder.
I'm Bruno, baby.
He was up to my shoulder. You know?
Was he really? Is he short?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know that.
He's like 5. And he's very short.
Oh.
A lot of these guys are super short.
I wouldn't take $1 billion to be that short.
But what did I learn? My natural temperament is not, I don't get discouraged by insanely talented people.
No, that kind of experience,
I get encouraged. I was just like, man, that was awesome. What did I take away from it?
What I take away from it is that the guys, the stars are stars for a reason. They
yes,
it, you know?
that talent is rewarded.
Yeah,
talent plus hard work is definitely
and also
rewarded.
I mean, like, we all have that undeniable talent part of ourselves, and to see that on display is like a really inspiring, beautiful thing. And you want to find it in yourself after that.
Artistically, it was interesting to hear a song stripped down, acoustic, before I heard the hit song on the radio. Because the next week or two, over the next months, it was all Bruno Mars everywhere. And I heard these songs all polished and produced. And maybe had I heard them, I would have been like, oh, it's a cool pop song. And it wouldn't have had the same impact as when I heard him just do it acoustic. I was like, that is an amazing song.
Oh, wow.
That's probably the biggest impact it had on me because I was like, hits are hit. Not just talent is rewarded. Hits are hits for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
At that early stage in my career, I was like, pop hits are not to be discarded and ignored. There's a reason every pop song you hear. And it definitely affected me years later as I began to write with the band, and we would sit down and you'd write at the piano or the guitar first. And the reason you would do that was if the song works there with very minimal production and nothing happening, if it works there and you're just singing it, you're like, okay, then anything we add to it will only enhance it. But oftentimes you throw in all this production and craziness, but the song itself is not, you know, it's like if the writing of the screenplay is amazing.
Yeah. No, I really.
You know, you put it into film, it's going to only enhance the words.
You know what it is? If you can't sit down and tell somebody the story, it's because the story sucks. It doesn't work.
Exactly. So the point is, what I learned from Bruno Mars in that moment, and then years later, again rediscovering it, is melody, lyric. That's the song, and I am a believer of that. And it kind of goes in waves. You hear a good groove, and sometimes it's an infectious bass line, but melody and lyric, that's the foundation. That's the song. That if I could just sing you something and you're like, oh man, you're in really good shape. Not to say you can't balance it. And of course you can hear vibe and you can hear, not every lyric necessarily has to slay. There's stuff that just works for all sorts of reasons. But generally speaking, I learned a very important thing about lyric and songwriting, watching Bruno Mars and then later doing it and watching how we work in the band and creating our own
really
records, melody and lyric. And don't be distracted by the other stuff until it's time to put that stuff in.
That's a beautiful message. Melody and lyric, don't be distracted by the other stuff.
It's all the melody and lyric. Buckle up, episode 18.